Hi, this is Tamsen Granger.
This is Dan Abuhoff.
Tamsen and Dan read the paper. And it's Sunday, January 20th, 2019. We're watching the playoffs.
We're watching the playoffs, but we got a lot to talk about, as we cover various things going on. We're going to get to how to invest your money, which I think everyone wants to do. That's right.
Really? Aren't there enough podcasts about that?
Without going into too much detail, a fascinating story of a brush with greatness at Mohonk, which we didn't tell you about last week. But so hang on for that. But first, let's start with what we're up to now.
Okay, I should say playoffs, meaning football playoffs. Of
course, everybody knows
we have listeners from around the globe.
That's true.
They may not be privy to the American sports schedule.
Let's hope so.
But there you have it.
Yeah.
Okay, and actually, we were kind of binge watching last week.
This is our version of binge watching, which is once every 2 days. Yeah.
No, every single night we were watching Bodyguard.
Bodyguard.
And it was fantastic. It was starring Richard Madden, and he was the bodyguard for the Home Secretary, played by Keely Haas.
Yes. And
it was gripping.
Well, I liked it. I think perhaps you found it more gripping than I did. Although it might be because the Bodyguard might have been more compelling in your mind. I will say it was sort of smoldering. Is that a fair...
He was smoldering?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. He was difficult. He has a lot of issues.
He has issues.
But it was an excellent show. It was recommended to us by the Zeke.
The Zekester?
Yeah.
Your youngest son?
Yes. And it was a good recommendation.
And it's only, 6 episodes? 5 or 6 episodes. You don't have to commit your entire life to it. And it was a leading show in the BBC. It was right up there with Downton Abbey. Matter of fact, more watched than Downton Abbey.
I don't remember the exact statistic. More people watched the final show of it than, I don't know.
All right.
Whatever. In England, it was extremely popular.
Right.
So
for good reason.
We can recommend it.
Yeah. So let's get to what's going on here in the paper. We're reading the paper. And, of course, the big story was Carol Channing passed away this week.
I think it was big for some people. Actually, it didn't get a huge amount of play on the TV.
Is that right?
It wasn't like Mary Tyler Moore.
Oh, she was a much bigger star than Mary Tyler Moore.
Well, not according to...
And I like Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about Carol Channing, who's obviously...
Hello, Carol.
Yes, identified...
Hello, Carol.
Anything to get you singing. She's identified with Oh, Dolly. But you know what I learned in going back on looking at her career? Her first success was Gentlemen Prefer Blondes in 1949. I didn't realize how big a success that was. And what we learned today is she was on the cover of Time magazine for being in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
And she was in her 20s or something.
Yeah, she was like 28 years old.
Yeah.
So that was huge. But what's odd about her, and it's because of the way she was kind of bigger than life, over the top, the way she looked and everything. She didn't get regular jobs. She had, mediocre shows. She got to replace Rosalind Russell in Wonderful Town, where I understand she was great. It would have been interesting to see. But there's between Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Hello, Dolly, there's 15 years. And they wrote a show with her in mind. That's the way she gets apart. And Jerry Herman and others say, we're writing a show, we think it's for you. 15 years. But, she was unique, and she embodied that character in Hello, Dolly, and she played it a zillion times. And she's just a great performer. I mean, the kind of things that come to mind that are kind of unusual and different about her is that, she was a little loopy. She played loopy characters. She was a little loopy in real life, which was endearing, actually. But she was loopy in part because people saw her as a health nut. I mean, she would go to all these restaurants after the shows with a little Tupperware filled with, like, carrot sticks or something. And that was considered completely odd.
It would still be odd.
Yeah.
To show up at any restaurant.
I'm not saying it's not odd.
With your own food.
I think it's not odd, but she did live to be 97. So somebody might want to make that connection. There may be...
your father lived to be 95 and he never ate a carrot in his life.
Yeah, well, look. It's what we call anecdotal evidence.
Okay.
The other thing is they made the Times, and I think this is fair, on the front page of the newspaper had the big Al Hirschfeld caricature. And I think everyone knows who Al Hirschfeld is, the caricaturist. who had these sort of bigger than life drawings of the Broadway stars, and of course would
and they were sort of caricatures, and he hid the name of his daughter
Nina
in the picture.
There'd be a little number on the bottom right.
Right, and you try to count all the Ninas.
And the number's
in the
there,
picture.
the New York Times, the two. And
Okay.
I haven't been able to find them, honestly.
Okay.
But in any event, but she was famous for that because of her look. And they actually, I'm looking
Because
at a
she
book.
was a caricature.
She was. And I'm looking at a book by a fellow named Eddie Shapiro that you had bought called Nothing Like a Dame, in which is just a bunch of interviews of folks, including Carol Channing, in this case, when she was 91. And he asked her, he said, "You've been caricatured, of course, by Al Hirschfeld," and he said you were his favorite subject. So Channing says, "Well, Zero Mostel and me, that's a dubious compliment." And the interviewer says, "Well, you two share," and she finishes the sentence, "an exaggeration of some kind that's totally unacceptable as a human being." And he says, "Unacceptable?" And she responds, "Would you like to look like Zero Mostel?" Anyway, this book has great funny stories about. Just tell one, and then we'll move on. It's a great story about the fact that, I should say, Carol Channing never got the job to be in the movie. She was in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes as a play, and the movie was Marilyn Monroe. She was in Hello, Dolly as a play, and the movie was Barbra Streisand. And she said for 3 weeks, Marilyn Monroe sat in the third row of the theater studying her as she prepared to play the part in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And the guy who was the conductor was a little bit of a ladies' man, and he could barely conduct the orchestra
With
because he
Marilyn
was
Monroe
staring at Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
So people kept saying there was one guy who was the musical accompanist who had his back to Marilyn, named Bus Davis. And Carol Channing says he was the greatest musical accompanist of all time, and he was gay. And people kept saying, "Bus, you have to turn around and look at Marilyn Monroe. You have to turn around and look at her." And finally, after a week, he turns around and looks at her, and he turns to someone and says, "Ask her, does she have a brother?" So there you go.
Hilarious.
Anyway, Carol Channing was great. There was a story about, I was going to get the sports quickly, Andy Murray. Andy Murray retired. And what's interesting about that, other than the fact that he's a great tennis player.
Roger Federer lost yesterday, right?
No, I didn't. I didn't know it was...
To like
It's going to happen.
a young kid.
He's like 60. I mean, it's not that big a deal. But Andy Murray's much younger.
My mother's upset.
Yeah, your mother will get over it. Andy Murray's...
Australian Open.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's hot in the Australian Open. He's not going to win that. It's a heat thing. But Andy Murray, much younger, he would have thought he would go on much longer than Roger Federer. But no. He retired. He's got a bad hip. He's going to have surgery. And one of the interesting fallouts of this is that a lot of women tennis players expressed admiration, but also sorrow that he was leaving, because he was a big supporter of women's tennis. Mm-hmm. His mother was a guiding force behind his athletic development. She was athletic herself, and he went out of his way to talk about women's tennis. And in fact, he was first, maybe the only male player, as a top player, to have a women's coach, which he did. There's a funny article in the Times that talks about this, and they have a lot of quotes from people, including Serena, and saying it's a huge loss, and he's the greatest guy. They also have a funny exchange on the Ellen DeGeneres show, where Sarah Silverman says to Ellen DeGeneres, if she's looking to date somebody, Silverman says, "I like a masculine man, but he has to be feminist. That contrast is very hot to me." Like Andy Murray, DeGeneres suggested. "Oh my God, like Andy Murray," Silverman exclaimed. Yes. So there you go. He's off the tennis circuit, but I guess he's still on the market. You had there was some article about. You should explain it.
Well, speaking of dating,
yeah,
we have bird sex once again.
Okay.
Is that what I'm allowed to talk about?
Well, you can talk about what you want. You had you also had an article about a real controversy with respect to the comments on women's bodies, which is kind of the...
Oh, you want me to do that first?
Sure,
okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So back to women and images of women. There's a big to-do, brouhaha, in La Belle France.
Yeah.
A writer, Jan Mox,
yeah.
Novelist, filmmaker, commentator, actually in an interview remarked that he doesn't date women his own age. He's like 60-something. He prefers women, Asian women in their 20s. And he would not consider dating a woman over 50, he said. He said women in their 20s, have extraordinary bodies. Have you seen a woman in her 50s? He says nothing extraordinary about those bodies.
Really?
And this caused an uproar.
Really? Really? People were ticked about
France. And
those people, they're sensitive in France.
And so there was all kinds of, chatter, mean things being said about him.
Yeah.
I mean, the women in France, they do not want to be reduced to merely their sexual allure, but
if necessary, though, that's
like
okay.
To prove,
Yeah.
they like to know they've still got it.
Exactly, it's not nothing.
And French women are, to some extent, successful in their sexuality. It said also in this.
I was going to take your
it
word
was
for
in
it.
an op-ed article,
Yeah.
actually, in the Times
Wow.
by Pamela Druckerman, titled "The Revenge of the Middle-Aged Frenchwoman."
Oh.
And she says that actually studies show that French women stay sexually active much more than American women over 50,
Okay.
etc. So proceeded all kinds of diatribes about beautiful women over 50, including Julia Roberts, Halle Berry, and various French women, etc. And the author, Jan Mox, at a certain point says, I just want women over 50 to stop sending me pictures of their breasts and buttocks. Apparently.
That's all it takes.
Yes.
It takes is that kind of comment.
So that's what's going on in
all right, that's
gay Paris.
human
and
sexuality.
Speaking of gay,
yeah, go ahead.
there was a tour I read about in the Polar Museum at Cambridge University, being given by Dan Vo, who drew his group's attention to a smooth white penguin egg found in Antarctica in the early 1900s. It was collected on an exhibition that included George Murray Levick, the author of a semi-secret 1915 paper, The Sexual Habits of the Adelie Penguin. Mr. Vos said he observed things that he thought were so scandalous, he overwrote them. He rewrote them in Greek. Specifically, the explorers saw two male penguins, as Mr. Vos says, going at it.
Oh my God.
So that tickled my fancy. And then I saw an article in the New York Times about a pair of gay penguin parents. And it was a story of an aquarium in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
And a story of two male penguins. I don't really know how to pronounce these names. Well, Magic is one. Magic I know how to pronounce. And Sven. And S-P-H-E-N.
We don't know if that's their names. That's the names the people gave them. Who knows what their names are?
What their penguin names are?
Different penguin names.
Anyway.
Might be Rabinowitz or something like that.
So they're in an enclosure with a bunch of young penguins, laying eggs for the first time, etc. And they had been observed for a while, and they were a couple. The penguin keepers observed them doing the mating dance, and which involves dancing around a little bit and picking up pebbles and bringing them to each other. And if you accept the pebble, and that means you accept the penguin as a mate, and you build your little nest and you sing to each other and all that. So they were a definite couple. Magic, younger, outgoing, very physical, loved visitors, loved humans. Sven, not so much. Older, quiet, a little bit taller.
Right. Kept to himself.
Anyway,
sat with his Kindle most of the evening.
Apparently penguins aren't born fabulous parents, okay? And the keepers had noticed that first time around with the laying of the eggs, it's a touch and go matter, okay? They and that many of these new chicks may not survive,
right?
Because the penguin parents just don't know what the heck they're doing.
I can see where this is
anyway,
going. Yeah.
So they observed that in particular one couple was kind of ignoring one of their eggs completely. So they squirreled it over to Sven and Magic's nest. Yeah. And Sven and Magic took it on and sat on it and raised it. And they said that Magic wasn't so great at the beginning because he's young, you know, and excitable. But Sven kind of straightened him out, taught him what to do. And in the end, only their chick survived. All the other new hatchlings did not live in the group. So there you have it, an interesting gay parenthood story in the penguin world in Australia.
Right. What I'm still wondering is what's the Greek phrase for going at it? Maybe we can look.
The Greeks went at it a lot, so
it must be
I
something.
suspect there are many
ways.
Greek words.
It's like the
for that. Just don't
the
even,
Eskimo words
just
for
don't
snowflake.
Even get me started.
It's just as well. All right, we got to get to sports. As you mentioned, it's all about the playoffs. You're dying to talk about the playoffs. I, of course, am interested in the scientific aspects of sport. And what we have is the marriage of science and sports. An article in the New York Times today about football, but in particular, how are they making those one-hand catches? You're wondering.
Well, it must be very scientific.
It is. And you're thinking that these guys are just better players, bigger hands, more coordinated, stronger grips. And the answer is no, and no. The answer is that they have silicone gloves. And you're saying, well, gee, guys have been wearing gloves for a long time. But the answer to that is not like this. These gloves have been developed over the last 20 years. I mean, it starts from, the story goes way back when people started wearing gloves which were used by folks who worked with glass. They were called glass cutters gloves.
Oh, I thought it was going to go way back to like Spider-Man.
No. Spider-Man actually is not a real person, but we'll talk about that later. The thing is that glass cutters gloves were rubbery mitts designed to catch, designed to so you wouldn't get cut by glass. And football players wore that. Then they wore what they called scuba gloves. It was all something. But meanwhile, there was a scientist in Pakistan who was consulted on this. And it turns out if you use a silicon polymer, it's sort of half liquid, half solid. And when a ball hits the glove, it acts like a liquid. And it slows up the ball in the hand. And hence you have the silicon polymer gloves. Tremendously successful. So not only, well, first of all, you see it on everybody. Secondly, you do see, of course, the Beckham great one-hand cast, but you're seeing players in college even on a regular basis.
So Beckham wears that glove?
Oh, yes.
And are you giving me all these details about it because we're going to make our own?
I wasn't thinking about it, but if that's what you want to do, sure, why not? In any event, that's the explanation. That's why it looks different to receivers these days. It looks different to me. You keep saying, how do you catch that? How do you catch that? One hand or two hand? Not used to seeing people catch balls the way they do now, and that's exactly.
Does that upset you? Is that like cheating?
No. It used to be cheating. Here's how it used to be cheating. No. Let me explain why it used to be cheating. It used to be people used something called stickum. It used to be that receivers would put this sticky stuff on their hands, and that would help them catch the gloves.
But it's in the gloves? It's not...
Let me finish the stickum story. So the thing with the stickum, that only became illegal because it left a residue. It made for dirty football. It got on people's uniforms. It was, a sanitary issue. It was gross. So they said, forget it. But there's nothing that's legal about helping yourself catch the ball otherwise. So as long as the polymer doesn't leak off on the football, you're okay. All right?
Good.
We've thought about this. All right. The second story is a little...
neatness counts.
Is a little sad. But it is science and sports, and I guess it's an advancement. But Mel Stottlemyre died at 77. Mm-hmm. He was a great pitcher for the Yankees. What I had forgotten about Stottlemyre is that his great success was not achieved when the Yankees were a great team, and that would be easy to dismiss. But he won 20 games 4 times when the Yankees were terrible, and that is a huge achievement. And he
20 games.
20 games in a season.
4 different seasons.
4 different seasons, right. And nobody does that anymore. But even then, it was a tremendous accomplishment. And then he developed shoulder problems. And and he became a great pitching coach for the Yankees and the Mets. He's one of the few figures who's a major person in connection with both New York franchises. As a matter of fact, I can't think of anybody else who's in that category. But what happened, this is sad actually, he died of, what's called multiple myeloma. And his son died of, he had a son that died of leukemia. He had 2 sons who actually pitched in the major leagues, but he had another son who died at a young age of leukemia. And in his view, both his disease and his young son's disease, his view, were likely caused by the radiation treatments that Mel Stottlemyre received when he hurt his shoulder with the Yankees.
Yes, I have heard that radiation can result in leukemia.
Right. So he is, and this is of course before his son was born, and he, again, it's anecdotal, but it made a very complicated relationship between him and the Yankees. Later, he went back to the Yankees, even though he harbored in his mind. I mean, he's had melanoma for 20 years, and his son, of course, had passed away years before that. So they don't do that anymore. I mean, there's an advancement there, but it's still a sad story. And the final story, sports, is kind of a one-liner about bucking broncos. Bucking broncos are still a thing. Bull riding is a big business, and it's as you remember from the movies or whatever. Guy gets on a bull, the bull goes crazy, and can you stay on for 8 seconds or not? 8 seconds is the limit, and usually or often they can't. And the reason that they can't now, that they almost never can now, and why is it? It is because they breed the bulls to be better at bucking. All right? In other words, the bulls you see today are much more athletic and stronger and wilder than they were 15, 20 years ago. Well, they haven't been improving the cowboys the same way. Or as they put in the article, if they keep breeding better bulls, they're going to have to start breeding better bull riders. And they're not. And these guys can't stay on the bulls anymore. So you have scientific developments which are, they thought, in the short run, helping the sport because they're making it more exciting. But in the long run,
Sticky
the bulls are
seats,
outmatching.
right? Silicone on the seats.
See, I didn't think about that.
I thought you were going to tie this all together.
You did. I was waiting for you.
Okay.
That was an opening for you. Well, I'm concerned about the future of
I
the
smell
Buffalo
startup.
Is that a good smell? Or what's that like? Go ahead.
All right. Well, I don't know if I can get farther away from the world of...
bucking broncos.
They're not broncos. I think broncos are horses.
Okay. Bucking bulls. Bulls.
Okay. But let's go back to the refined atmosphere of the Grolier Book Club.
Yeah.
The Grolier Club in Manhattan, East 60th Street. Mm-hmm. It's a townhouse, a private club. Society of bibliophiles. You know what a bibliophile is? Someone who loves books. Mm-hmm. And it's a, like I said, a private club. But you can go there to look at their exhibitions. And they have a lot of books. Their big collection, if you can believe it, is of book auction catalogs.
Okay.
Which helps you trace the history of various books and their provenance, etc., which can be really important. And they're devoted to the cause of exhibition and collection of books and prints, which they feel are as worthy of display as paintings and sculptures. Of course, back over 100 years ago when they first started this, there was reason to, fight for all this attention. Well, keep in mind that as books began to be, going back to the 15th century, as books began to be printed, people were worried that, the artistic value of them would suffer relative to manuscripts, handwritten books. And then we get into the 20th century where you really got all these mass production methodologies, and then even a greater fear that the beauty of the artistic quality of the books would suffer. So hence an attempt to
Right.
kind of promote and embrace
Okay.
this work. I should mention that I think even as we speak, what's coming up is Bibliography Week in New York, where there's a tremendous amount
It's a whole
of
week?
events. It's
Yeah.
a whole week.
Oh,
It's
wow.
like Comic-Con
Probably.
or Broadway Con.
How'd you get a hotel room? That's
Yeah, I
crazy.
don't even know.
Yeah.
But they have all kinds of talks and lectures, and it's a real geek fest, as they mention in the Grolier Club article. Anyway, there's a great exhibition there right now about French books and manuscripts, and it's just a beautiful old building, reminiscent of one of those great private libraries and book cellar places where that are so beautiful. And they also mentioned that there's an interesting exhibition up at the Yale Library of Rare Books right now called Bibliomania. With actually, and here's a connection between Grolier and the Yale Bibliomania. In the Bibliomania, there's the exhibition of the collection concerning the collection of Thomas Phillips from England, who I guess was trying to. It's called Every Book in the World, and he went crazy collecting. His collection was so massive. After he died, it took over 100 years to catalog and disperse. And one of the displays in the Grolier Club is one of his closets, which is just this huge pile. It's a, book hoarder's closet of all these manuscripts and papers, and kind of a cautionary tale. Anyway, there's some other fun things there, including an exhibition of a collection from, it's collected by some Italian guys in the 16th century or whatever. But what's interesting in that collection is they have books where the fore edges, the edges of the book, the opposite side from the spine, are actually painted with, quite nice little paintings done by a distant cousin of Titian. But anyway, they're kind of cool looking. That would be fun to see. Also, there's some marbled papers, etc. That's going to be there for a while. So, Grolier Club and Bibliography Week.
That sounds like a
Lots
salesman.
of fun.
Salesman. It sounds like a salesman saying, who did the painting on the other side of the book? Distant cousin of Titian. Distant cousin. It sounds a little vague to me.
Cesare Vecellio.
Oh, there you go.
Great name.
All right. I'm out of my league. All right, so here's something that we had to talk about. We have a lot to talk about. This has to be addressed. Commuting scarf. Someone has knitted a commuting scarf. A woman who has been taking a regular train journey from a town in the Bavarian countryside to Munich every day. That's where she works. Has been suffering from the experience of train delays, something we know about on New Jersey Transit.
This I don't even believe. Because all my life, people have talked about how much better trains are in Europe than in the U.S.
Well, you're right
they
on
have
here.
Delays?
That's the issue. It turns out she suffered not interminable, but real train delays on a regular basis.
Here's the deal. Probably the trains were delayed 1 or 2 minutes.
No, they were delayed. And she ended up knitting a scarf, and it's too complicated to describe. I've read the article 3 times. I don't get it.
Knitting is complicated.
No, she's knitting it.
No, it's complicated.
There's
Only
code.
women can do it.
There's code as to what color she uses as to the length of the delay. So you have these various bars in the scarf that signify different length delays. I still can't figure it out. In other words, delays of more than a half hour or in red. This is a black and white picture. But apparently there's quite a lot of information in this scarf. People will be interpreting for years and years.
Well,
What's
why
interesting,
are you telling us about this? Are you getting ready to start your own delay
You know,
scarf?
you're always just, you're not letting me get this story
That's
out.
going to be a long scarf.
Well, first of all, it will be a long scarf. Secondly, it will be tremendously profitable because this was just sold on eBay for $8,600. All right? Now,
so if things go south with the football playoffs,
yes,
we can depend on your income from your commuting scarf?
Because things are not going south with New Jersey Transit. It's just sitting there at Metuchen. I'll be knitting a scarf.
Queen of the train delays.
Well, look, it's like Madame Defarge in Tale of Two Cities, knitting while people are being beheaded. It's the same mood you're in, And I would probably do it a little differently, frankly. I would probably just allow the length of the delay indicate how long the bar was in the scarf. Just an idea. But on your point about the Germany thing, here's the quote. It has become somewhat of an urban myth that Germans are always on time and trains in Germany are on time. But it's not always true. And that's the message they're getting out here. So maybe that gives you a pass for New Jersey Transit. Even the Germans can't get it right. And they're knitting about it. And I don't know, maybe there's a scarf in my future. Or your future. It could be a gift. Christmas is coming,
Can't wait.
Yeah.
You should start now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this week I read an op-ed piece by David Brooks. Mm-hmm. Not a big David Brooks fan, actually, but he talked a little bit about teaching and learning, and he told a story where he was teaching, and he had to cut back his office hours. And he mentioned it to his students because he was having a personal problem. And, he was...
I think he said it was a family issue.
A family issue,
yeah,
personal problem,
right.
and wasn't going to be able to have office hours. And as a result, people emailed him and offered him prayers.
Yeah.
And but the big thing is, he says the whole atmosphere of the class changed, and it was much more positive, and he felt it helped the class. It helped the learning, and so he looked at it a little bit, looked at some research, and indeed, research seems to show that emotion is essential to learning in the sense that it can be essential to reason. Emotion helps you assign value to things. And he quoted a study by Patricia Kuhl at the University of Washington, where she took infants learning to speak Chinese, learning Chinese. And face-to-face, the infants were learning like crazy, absorbing the Chinese like crazy. And the ones who instead did it by video showed rapt attention, really studied the video, but didn't seem to learn a thing.
Really?
I'm not sure what that tells you about emotion. It might tell you more about face-to-face versus
Well, no, there's no connection there.
And he does say that when classes are going well, there's evidence that student brains and teacher brains are in this kind of sync that makes learning succeed. So that was interesting to me because I
think
teach.
that is interesting.
And you do notice once in a while a sense of chemistry in a particular class that seems to help the effort. And it is true. You're trying to engage the students and make this material matter to them.
Yeah.
It's nice to think that if it matters to the crusty old teacher, it might matter to them.
Yeah, there's something to that. I'll go with that. All right, so look, we promised, how to become a huge zillionaire based on investing, and we're coming through with that. And the reason we're...
Oh, that's not the football pool?
No, it's not the football
Okay.
pool. Very few people can do what we're doing with football pool. I don't want other people to lose their money.
That's only because Joe Moody helps you out. Does the picks.
It does. That's give Joe a shout out. Jack Bogle died. That's what trips this wire here. Jack Bogle, a giant in the investment industry, started Vanguard. And he is the champion of low-fee investing in which you buy the market or buy pieces of the market and don't worry too much about other advice. And that's what Vanguard's all about. It's a less profitable approach. It was an approach that's frowned upon, criticized over the years by people who are more in the way of saying, listen to me, I'll get you the hot stock, I'll do the right thing for you. Even, my fees aren't so bad. I'll
when
take
I
you under
win,
my
we'll
wing.
all win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or big institutions who corral customers and say that this is the only way to play the market when you have the guidance of a big institution. He was more conclusive. He was more open. Got more people into the market, and did a lot of good. And a lot of people have in a lot better financial position because of him. But of course, his model was one that resulted in less fees for the broker. So as a result, and take this as you will, he died with only $80 million in his estate, as the Times describes. And you're saying, is that a joke? And the answer is, no, it's not. His contemporaries and folks who were much less innovative than him, associated with Fidelity and other places like that, were multiple billionaires. And he says, I think he's a little on the sensitive side, that a lot of in the billionaire club wouldn't even deal with him. He's a small fish. He's a nobody. And only because he felt that investor rights were important. He's a very interesting guy. He also had a heart transplant like 25 years ago and kept on. But in any event, that is a big loss. But let me give you Jack Bogle's 5 rules for investing success. That's what you want to hear. Get your pencil. This is the time.
I'm ready.
5 rules. Number 1, stay the course. Stay the course. Long-term investors. And I can tell you, I know stats on this, that if the market goes up, whatever market goes up in a particular year, let's call it 8%, the average investor gets less than that, 6%. Why? They buy at the wrong time. Well, they don't buy at the wrong time. They sell at the wrong time. So you just stay the course.
Okay.
Stay the course. Go with the market. 2, beware the experts. Beware the experts. Bogle, quote, money managers missed all the warning signs before the 2008 financial crisis. How could so many highly skilled, highly paid securities analysts and researchers fail to question the toxic-filled balance sheets and know that this was going to happen? Experts don't know very much. Number 3, keep costs down. Vanguard is an example of a low-cost investment alternative. Above all, don't pay much in terms of fees. Number 4, don't get emotional. Impulse is your enemy. And number 5, own the entire stock market. Bogle said at the time of this interview he hadn't bought an individual stock for 25 years. That's it. And I hope you wrote that down.
He died penniless.
He died.
It's just a few million bucks. Why would we listen to his advice?
Yeah, you have a point.
Dale, you're leading our listeners astray.
Well, yes.
Once again.
Sorry about that. Listen, it's the problem with the advice is it's boring. It's not exciting.
But you think it works?
There's no question it works. Okay. Mathematically it works. But I hope you wrote that down. We're not repeating it. Go ahead. Died penniless.
Well, I'm flailing around looking for a book to read.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, because I teach, I'm reading all the time.
Yeah.
So during, about to go back to classes, and I like to have something kind of entertaining to read as a counterpart to all the reading I have to do. I just finished a really fun book called Circe by Madeline Miller. And that was a retelling of the ancient Greek mythology about it. It was fun, Daniel.
Yeah.
But Circe happens to be mainly described as a witch. So I had witches on the mind, and then I saw an article about a trilogy by Deborah Harkness, the All Souls trilogy. And the number 1 book of that trilogy is called Discovery of Witches. Yeah. So this writer is actually a historian of science and medicine at USC. Okay, she loved history. She went to Holyoke undergrad, took a course. Her major was Renaissance Studies, took a course called Magic, Knowledge, and the Pursuit of Power in the Renaissance, and she was, gobsmacked. She just turned her world around. She ends up going on to grad school at Northwestern, at Oxford, where she worked on a dissertation about John Dee, the alchemist and mathematician for Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I. probably didn't know she had her own mathematician.
No, let's get back to the trilogy. Let me hear about the trilogy.
Fascinated by the sort of idea of magic. Mm-hmm. And rumor has it she is related to one of these so-called Salem witches as well. Anyway, the trilogy is wildly popular, so much so that a television show has been made of it. I think it's like an 8-part series so far.
It's made already?
Yeah.
It's on the show? That's not the one with Matthew Good, is it?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, the Times kind of liked that, but they didn't love it. But that's hers? I didn't realize.
That's hers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, she describes her work as sort of Harry Potter type stuff for grown-ups. It's grown-up issues.
That's the one that I said, and I'm sorry I don't know the name, but anybody will be able to figure it out. But they're saying is, in the review in the Times, they said, you know something? It's fun, it's good, it's high-class cheese is the way they put it. And they said that they have all these great English actors, there's only one problem. The woman protagonist is not up to the level of the other actors. So it's a little bit of, there's some teenage girl acting with these...
She's out of her depth with these great British actors.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, this is exactly the kind of book I'm looking for, I think. The author, Deborah Harkness, describes the books as... pretty character-driven, not all about...
All right. The Times, so they like Matthew.
It should be fun. So I'm going to look that up. Okay. Discovery of a Witches by Deborah Harkness. Yeah. Wish me luck.
Yeah, all right. So we'll close, as I promised at the beginning, with a Brush with Greatness story. So here we are at Mohawk last week. And this is, I think this is...
This is not the musicians.
No. We took a break. We had to go to the spa.
We brushed closely with a lot of great musicians.
Yes, we did. But then we took a spa break. Tamsen says to me, let's go to the spa. In particular, let's go down to, what's the pool described as? The mineral pool or something? It's a hot tub.
Yeah.
A large hot tub.
Outside, under the stars.
And which is, it's a reasonable request on Tamsen's part, notwithstanding. Perhaps that they're playing the NFL football playoffs and we could have been watching the football game. But, I'm game. I said, okay, we'll do it. Forget the football. Let's go. And here...
What a guy.
Well, that's what... Here's what
guy.
Happens. This is poetic justice. So we head to our respective locker rooms, and Tamsen still hasn't gotten over this, but on the edge...
You make it sound like they're team locker rooms. There was the ladies' lockers and the men's lockers.
I'm on the men's team, and I go into the men's locker room, and they have a little bit of a lounge on the outside, which apparently I've learned since from Ms. Granger that they don't have in the women's. And
the women do not have a TV.
Yeah, and there's a TV there. And which is hard to find in Mohawk. There aren't too many TVs. And there are two guys sitting there in these big chairs, and there are only two chairs there, watching the NFL playoff game. And I walk in, and one of the guys is...
So these guys tell their wives we're going to go have a massage, and they're skipping the massage.
Listen, so here we go. I go in there, and I see one guy got a big football giant sweatshirt. The other guy, not so much. They're clearly buddies. Talking, watching the game. And I walk in and I say to them, so what's going on? What's going on in the game? Is, are the Colts catching up at all to Kansas City, which is the game? And the guy with the giant sweatshirt says to me, something, they got a touchdown on a block punt, but they're not really getting it together. Kansas City's going on. He's telling me what's going on. And I look at him and I say to him, you look an awful lot like Dave Gettleman. Now, Dave Gettleman is the general manager of the Giants. And he kind of looks at me, and he looks at his friend, and he says to me, I am Dave Gettleman. All right? So, then I said, well, nice to meet you. He asked for my name. We have a nice conversation. I told him Saquon Barkley was a great pick. I gave him a few,
Pointers,
a few points for what he can do in the draft coming up. He's very gracious about accepting my advice. But here's and I'm saying to myself later, was that really him? Was it sure it's him? And I do look up the picture later, and it's definitely him. So I felt good about that. But I made one other connection. Okay? When I did look him up, and I was wondering what he was doing down there, by the way. And I did look him up, and I realized when I looked him up that he had been in New York before coaching. And the area that he had lived during a large part was in the White Plains area.
Right.
Well, you may recall, Ms. Granger, that when we were in the hot tub... that's exactly it. You're getting it.
With a lady from White Plains?
Yes, we were.
But there was a man sitting next to her.
No. She was not part of a couple.
No. There was a man sitting next to her who got out and left.
That was not her husband.
So you're saying, you heard it here first, Gettleman's wife was stepping out on him in the hot tub.
My point
I'm
is...
sorry we're putting this on. This is not the purpose of this podcast, Daniel.
That's not it. I'm
Really?
saying no one's stepping out at anybody, but I
You're
think...
outing Mrs. Gettleman.
Well, let me back up half a second. We get into the hot tub, and you have to know that Tamsen starts chatting up the woman next door. Now, let me just pause on that for a second. How many couples go to a hot tub and the woman starts chatting up other people in the hot tub right away? Is that what we're doing the hot tub for?
I was sitting awfully close to her.
Oh, Tamsen.
Trying to be friendly.
Exactly. When you're supposed to try to be friendly with your husband. But putting that aside for just a moment, so you're chatting up this woman who tells us that she is from White Plains. And I am putting forward the theory that, in fact, we were speaking with the wife of Dave Gettleman. That's all I have to report. It's not confirmed 100%. So,
it's not confirmed 0%. Frankly, we don't even know if he's married.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Wikipedia?
Listen, we're ahead of the game. It's not the first time that we have been a half a step ahead of the regular media. So until next week.
This is Tamsen Granger.
And Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan read the paper.
See ya.